Morning, everyone. Hello. My name is Jeanette Andrews, and I am so delighted that you all joined us this morning for part of Design Research Weeks, especially sort of our patient-centeredness portion of the day as we look at design, healthcare, and magic. So we'll kind of get things kicked off today with a little bit of like welcome and housekeeping. And then we've got two workshops this morning and then sort of time on your own this afternoon. So, and I'm going to clear that off and toggle back to my own screen here, hopefully. Okay, so all of you all have already read the basic description, but just in case, as you know, basically our kind of task for today, more or less, is looking at how we can actually learn things from the field of magic prop design, and how that hopefully help us to innovate more effective, less wasteful, more patient-centered medical devices. And today we're going to be looking at central line kits, which my collaborator in this endeavor, Stephen Wood, will explain further, but just to kind of set the stage for today. So just to give you a little bit of a rundown on the schedule for today, and then for anybody who wants, I can also drop this schedule to you as well. But basically right now we're going to be kind of just doing a brief welcome, really probably for like 5 minutes. And then for the next bit after that, I'll be doing a workshop on magic and design and sort of the design thinking behind magic. And then Stephen will be talking about the actual design and usage of teleflexes, central line kits, which he will explain in depth. And then we'll divide you all into teams right around noon for a break for lunch. And then we have space just in the dance studios right here. We'll show you where they are to, kind of work on your own, or if you want to grab other space in the building or wherever you want, feel free. So basically then you have the whole afternoon to kind of work and play on your own. And then tonight over at Ryder at the Center for Design, where I know that many of you probably first came in, then that's where we're actually going to open sort of the awards and final pitch presentation. Stephen and myself will do a quick magic performance, then you guys will present your pitches, and then as we as the judges are doing our scoring, then there'll be a reception kind of happening throughout the evening, and then we'll do some awards. So that's kind of a quick rundown of the day. And again, after we do the workshops and stuff, I can drop this whole schedule to all of you all. So I'll turn it over to Stephen for some basic housekeeping kind of stuff as it pertains to Northeastern that you guys are familiar with, but we'll go over it again.
I mean, not all of you are students here. This is the ballroom, so we do have this space up until 12 noon. After that, we have the dance studios, which we will physically show you. Unless are there any dancers here? No, okay, yeah. We'll physically show you where the dance studios are. You have that space, but you also can just go anywhere you want on campus or off campus if you decide to do that. So you have, collaborative space to work in that's been designated. But if you decide that you have other spaces that you want to use, there's lots of different spaces throughout the university. Bathrooms, always important. If you go on any floor, they're out and to the left. And they're a little bit hidden on both of these floors. But if you go left, you'll see the sign for bathrooms. There's also water bottle fill stations there. For coffee, there is a Starbucks on the first floor, and there's also a Dunkin' Donuts. There's several Dunkin' Donuts. It's required by law in Massachusetts that every building has Dunkin' Donuts. So there's one right across from us. If you go up the food center, you can see there's a Dunkin' there. And then for food, They just took away my favorite taco place and replaced it with bubble tea, but there are a couple, yeah, which I also like. But there's on the first floor, there is food, there's pizza, there's burgers, including veggie burgers, and there's also some other kind of, oh, they Popeye tickets, but you have to get in line right now to get it. And you can also go across the street with a couple of food options there for lunch. Other than that, I think that's enough of the housekeeping issues. And we'll explain a little bit more about, you know, using these spaces and what you're going to be doing there in a moment.
Right. Okay, so again, just an outline of kind of the goals of the day, but you know, kind of looking at again what inspiration we can draw from the magic, both the kind of strategic thinking in the sort of sequential design and process-based design thinking that happens within magic props, and then also sort of the actual use of materials and things like that, and then how those systems and processes and techniques and materials can be implemented within medical device design. So that's really kind of our food for thought for today. Because this is a hackathon and because there are prizes involved, we wanted to give you a heads up on the judging criteria. We will have a best overall team design. I believe we are going to have, I think, 3 teams. I'm not sure. I'm like, are you participating in the hackathon or you're in and out throughout the day? Okay, so in that case, we might only have 2 teams. We'll be looking at a best overall team design. The best overall team design does win prizes. Then we'll sort of be giving also like honorary mentions basically for best use of a magic principle, and then most practical medical application, and then most innovative use of design, kind of design thinking. The prizes for best overall team are that everybody on the winning team will get an Amazon gift card. So there is some incentive here. Okay, so for the judges for today, first, I'll introduce Stephen, who you all have already met, but has a background in toxicology, is a nurse practitioner. I am not going to read your whole bio, but is a fellow at Harvard's Petrie-Flom Center as part of the law school and bioethics. Has done a lot of conferences with World Extreme Medicine Conference, and again, kind of looks at really extreme emergency situations. Now is faculty here at Northeastern at the Bouvet College of Nursing. I think that is the main talking points, but jump in if I miss something.
No, that's it.
Okay. And I'm one of the other ones. So hello. I'm Jeanette Andrews. I'm a New York City based artist and magician. I've been a full-time magician my entire life. Honestly, I started doing magic as a very young child. And this is honestly the only job I've ever had. So I've been doing, I started doing magic professionally when I was 6. And performing magic when I was 4. So really my brain is only wired to think in terms as a magician. The lens through which I solve problems and see the world. About 10 years ago, I recontextualized my more entertainment-based background within the contemporary art world. So now I do a lot of work with museums, typically in the US. Recently did a piece at the Quebec City Biennial. And then I also do a lot of work with academic institutions. I just got back last week from being a visiting artist for the University of Houston and doing commissioned pieces with them. So, and I was recently an affiliate of MetaLab at Harvard as part of their digital humanities research program. So that's a lot of, kind of what I do is taking a little bit more of a kind of research-based holistic approach to look at how we can think about magic in other contexts and other ideologies. Good morning. And Michael is our other judge from Center for Design. I'll let you, I'm happy to introduce you if you want to give your own highlights, you're welcome to.
Sure. Hi, guys. Michael Vegas. I'm here in the design program. I've been doing design work since probably years, in 1993. I've had clients in tech and in fashion and furniture. So, like, we'll see a storage tech, listing board. Brothers, wasteful furniture manufacturing, clients all over the world, as well as on the White House, which is pretty exciting. Myself and Paolo Cucciarelli will be again, and we're going to be checking in on you throughout the day, and looking forward to seeing what you guys are up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. So I also want to give a brief shout out. I know we do have several people joining us online. So for those of y'all watching on Zoom, hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us. I won't lie, we are mainly speaking. I'm like, you're going to see me talking to the folks in the room a lot, but alas, here we are. With that being said, and with everyone being introduced from our side, we would love to know you guys and love to meet all of you, because one of the things that has been most exciting, I mean, for a bit of further introduction on how this came about is Stephen and I have kind of started the Magic and Medicine Lab early in 2021, maybe. So I was doing basically I ended up getting asked through some of the Harvard-based talks that I was doing. Got asked to do a talk for there's the Harvard Undergraduate Magic Club. This because of course there is. And so I was giving a talk to that group virtually during the pandemic. Stephen was watching on Zoom and reached out to me and said, hey, I'm in medicine and have wanted to do something incorporating magic and medicine for a while. And I, like everybody that's sitting in my house, so I feel like I want to contribute in a more meaningful way to the world at some capacity. So I was so related to his email. So we started doing a lot of deep dives on a lot of scholarly research that was out there, looking at different facets of magic in terms of how it utilizes a lot of cognitive bias, and things that we see a lot enacted from practitioners in the medical field, and also things about medical misinformation. We did a presentation about that with the Future Bomb Center at Harvard last just in January. And so we have been having a lot of conversations about, kind of the doors that magic opens in terms of thought. And then it got connected both through your avenues and through mine to the Center for Design, and started thinking about the intersection of magic design and healthcare. And in one of our early conversations about this, it was honestly just one of those moments when we were on a call, I was sitting on my couch and I was like, medical advice. This is like, we were just ping-ponging back and forth. And, one of the things I love so much about magic is that it is, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that it is so much more richly interdisciplinary than people realize, I think. And so one of my favorite kind of, I won't say pastimes, but is I love walking around hardware stores, craft stores, just aimlessly, and just looking at different materials. Like, this is a hobby. And so I'll just be like, I don't know, I just want to see like what different types of hinges there are, just to like file away. And what different, whatever. And so I've been working on a project, I think I was 17, of like a complicated, like sleight of hand magic routine that I was working on actually for a competition. And I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and there used to be a medical device supply store, like a couple blocks from where I lived. And I was looking for a way to make liquid vanish. And again, I always just walk around art supplies, crafts, or covers, whatever, and I was like, and honestly, it's like a touch on my radar because my grandma had like needed, a new water or something. And I was like, I don't think that's something. And so I just kind of started walking around and I was like, looking at the different things and different absorbent materials and different types of like, again, things that were skin safe, things that were flexible tubing, all of this stuff that I started to thought that was like the first thing I made, whereas we're doing the inverse of what we're doing and using a medical device to create a magic product. So in all candidness, I had forgotten about that whole process for the last 15 years. And then in that more direct correlation until we started talking about it. And then when I was like, wait a minute, medical devices immediately even was like central line kids, and we started talking about that. So we'll both get into our kind of angles of looking at this, but all of this is a way A, we how to develop why we're all here at B. Talk about how as I mentioned before, we'll talk about how magic is so interdisciplinary, but one of the things that we've been most excited about and planning this now for the last like 6 months or whatever, is that it does bridge together design, engineering, material science, even kind of, user experience design, honestly, medicine, all these sorts of fields that I think are really interesting. So we were very excited to see who would be here today. So we would love to get to know you all. If you would please, if you feel comfortable, introducing yourself and maybe telling what field of study you are currently in, were in, are excited about now, looking to get into, what your passions are in terms of your areas of interest.
And if you don't know, then it is.
Yeah, everyone's going to be an astronaut.
And also, just to add to some housekeeping, there's going to be coffee coming in at 5. And there are going to be some snacks in the back. And we have this space until 3 o'clock as well. So you can use this space for dance studios, other spaces. So I'm going to just start. I'm going to go around. Everyone comfortable introducing yourself? All right.
So hi, I'm an associate professor from PT. My favorite work is organic electronics, space electronics, so particle electronics with spherical form factors. Name is Connect. And my general interests are with lean towards art, photography, and things like that. And I'm really interested in neural devices.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Minu. I'm an assistant professor in our institute and also our school. I am a genetic engineer, so we design genetic circuitry for cells, and so I guess electrical engineering inside the cell, your logic is in cell, and we can imagine cell, and that was all chemistry. Okay, my years will be able to operate more consistently. And then imagine how to do this in the community, operations in this group, hoping to bring some joy, wonder, for kids that actually consider that people. Looking forward to knowledge and learning more about how I can inspire people to guys do that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Dana. My study computer science and psychology undergrad. Going into UX design, applying master's programs. So that's why I'm very very excited about
You're all going to be able to
Yeah, don't worry. We got you covered.
Terrifying. My name is Hannah. I'm a secondary history and biology major here at Emerson. And currently I'm doing human editing in the endocrinology division of Boston Children's Hospital for Harvard Medical School, and I'm also managing a robotics team that I'm part of, and so So I'm really curious to, I've worked in pretty much every single hospital, kind of for part-time, the box in there, and so I'm really curious to learn how medical device is done.
I'd say you got some qualification there. Yeah. All right.
Good morning, my name is Grace. I'm a full-time chemotherapist scientist at hackathon. And I'm happy to be here. I also work in partners and I'm just interested to learn that's looking forward.
Yeah.
Good morning, my name is Rebecca. I'm a assistant here at since then, the master's program. So first, I think one, so this is the incorporated in, so it was nice. I have a degree in 2017, so I was in that Hi everyone, I'm Sydney and I'm a graduate student at State Experience Wednesday. And I'm going to do this about the design of technology device and also medical device. So hopefully I love the section today.
Hi, I am a graduate student systems.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Romy. I'm a biomedical scientist at my training, and I spent the last 5 years working in medical medicine. But I recently quit my job to try and find a more meaningful project. I'm very motivated by use of design, especially applied to medicine. So I think this session is going to be very interesting.
My name is Sujit, and I'm pursuing master's here in I passionate about UX that development a lot. And what a lot of things maybe I want to learn in that. And today I'm going to coordinate coordinating.
Hi guys, I'm Shibra. So I have a background and I'm in product design. So this one towards the industrial product design. Which is any sort of product. And then I graduated from my master's program here at Northeastern in experience design. And I have some experience as an experience designer. And I think this kind of like aligns with something that I've always thought feel like and how can we make it more serious topics. But they're kind of really good.
Hi, I'm Richard Birdie, and I'm the associate director of Health and I'm really thrilled to be here because I'm very excited about genetics. But I'm also really excited because this particular project that Steve brought to us is sort of the perfect project for design and engineering and just people who have never been engaged to work on because it doesn't require specialized knowledge around health or healthcare, and it does require thoughtful design. So I'm really excited to see what y'all come up with, and for all of those that you are here to learn, I hope you can.
All right. Nice to meet everybody.
Wow, I am,
Impressed with the crowd.
I'm blown away. I'm like all of you are so impressive. I feel like the amount of neurons firing in this room is very impressive. Actually, it's very interesting because Shipra, something you said, I think is really is a perfect jumping off point for our conversation for the day and is a big part of why I have the practice that I have in terms of, like you speaking to things that are both joyful and wondrous, and then also, you know, things that are taboo. And in my conversations with people over the last several months, and even in the last 24 hours, as I've been explaining, like even as I met Dana yesterday at the Center for Design, the Design Research Week kickoff, and you know, we're talking about like, what is the intersection of magic that we often think of, you know, historically within American society as a very like lowbrow art form, right? And something that we oftentimes I don't think that society sees as very meaningful. And honestly, it's been kind of my life project to try to change that, and to try to, you know, have us have more meaningful dialogue around this. So that's a big part of why we're here today. So I love what you're about. So that's this idea of how do we use magic to sort of design the impossible. So that's what I'm going to be talking about for the next like hour and a half, as I kind of jump into my aspect of today and of the workshop. Yes, Stephen has an unexpected meeting. So in case anybody has any last second questions before he heads out,
I'll be back.
he'll be back to demo these kids for you in a bit. So basically, in terms of, you know, kind of my time for what we'll be looking at, we'll quickly jump through like a what and why of like, why are we doing this? Which you all already know, but I will teach you some magic. So we're gonna be, yeah. And then you'll see very quickly, you know, just from a process standpoint, how magic explicitly relies on a lot of very nonlinear problem solving, due to the very fact that it's trying to take something and sort of render a impossible seeming scenario that is, you know, not truly happening. So, and then we'll kind of dissect how and why some of this works, both from an object standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a sequence standpoint, et cetera, and then kind of talk about how we can apply these things. So again, you know, kind of through my own lens, this looking at things as a magician is the only way my brain is wired to work, which is helpful and not. I mean, I literally have, I did my first magic performance when I was 4. I have 2 memories of being alive before I was a magician, like literally feeling the upholstery on a car my parents used to have, and then like a table at my grandmother's house. So very just tactile memories. So I don't, you know, again, I just don't even really know how to problem solve in any other way than this. And candidly, it's a way of problem solving that I think, like, I wish kids would learn in school and stuff, because it's very different. Again, because you're having to sort of bring these impossible seeming scenarios to life. A big hobby of mine is philosophy, and there's philosophers doing a lot of research in terms of looking at the experience of magic more from sort of a phenomenological standpoint. His name's Jason Ludington. He's with I think he's technically on sabbatical right now. But I like his definition of magic for our purposes, which seems so pedestrian, but I think it's actually helpful, which he talks about magic not as deceiving, but as presenting a moment of an illusion of impossibility. Because I think that's something, especially that sort of contributes to that taboo factor of people being like, oh, magic's all like deceptive. And it's like, well, in a sense, like, yes, your sensory perception may be being deceived, possibly, yes. But it's really more about a lot of challenging the beliefs that we hold. And I think that's a lot of where my personal vested interest lies. It's a very actively challenging sensory perception, psychological perception, et cetera. So again, this is really, you know, kind of rehashing that, but magic relies so much on a lot of sort of implicit assumptions about things. And again, I think especially within the design process, that's something that is often trying to be dismantled, is the use of, okay, what are our assumptions about an object, a process, etc., and then how can that actively be dismantled? And again, I think magic challenges us to look at, here is, per that Leddington quote, something that seems impossible, yet it happened anyway. So then it makes us reframe what is something that is genuinely impossible versus unlikely, improbable, unexpected, surprising things that fit into these other categorical ideas. Honestly, I'm like, we may do this quickly, since we have a small group. I'm gonna jump down and hand out a couple of cards to you guys. So let's see, I think we have enough here.
Okay, so everybody, obviously cards you all have a plus sign, circle on them. We're gonna do what's,
I don't want to call it an optical illusion because it's not technically that, but together we'll all make the image of the circle vanish. Here's how. I'll ask everybody to hold the card out at arm's length with both hands. One thumb on each corner so that the circle is to your left. Okay? And now close your right eye. Right eye closed. And now cross the gaze of your left eye. So your left eye is focusing on the plus sign and only the plus sign. Right eye closed, left eye staring at the plus sign. And now very slowly bend your elbows and bring heart straight towards your face. And just want to show you the purple vanish. And if you'd like to make it reappear, just move the card further or closer to your face. Do we get it? Yeah. So this is one of my favorite demonstrations because this is just a biology thing. And what we've all just done, and a lot of you probably know this already, is find kind of lovingly known as your optic nerve. This is obviously just for everybody who's actually in healthcare, this better than I do. But it's a very tiny portion of your eye that's not sensitive to light in the way the rest of your eye is. So what's happening is because you're not actually having light hitting that back part of your eye, your brain is having to fill in the missing part of the image with what it thinks should be there, or what it is used to seeing there. So in this example, it's just a blank space. So I think what this then opens the door for in terms of thought is then thinking about, how often, the brain, as we all know, is constantly taking innumerable shortcuts to be filling in those essentially the biological gaps that are happening around us. This is something magic relies on heavily. But this, I think, is just a perfect little example of that happening. A similar thing is, I'm not exactly sure, honestly, I haven't done the mathematical triangulation on this to know if this will work in this room, but basically, our field of vision that we see in sharp focus is arguably like the width of your own thumb. If I were to put up a slide of text that you have never seen before, and you are asked to not focus on any of it, look at one word in the center, and not move your eyes, and I asked you to read the last line of it, you would have no idea. I have done this. It is wild. We are only able to see in actual, even with perfect vision, acute sharp focus, and arguably between 4.5 to 7 degrees. Some people say for facial recognition and reading, it's the smallest 2 degrees, I think. But it's just a small sliver. So again, it's showing how our perceptual awareness and the way in which, you know, we're having saccades and eye movement that is constantly just trying to fill in missing parts of information. So it seems to us like we have this seamless, sharp focus of vision all the time, when that's really not what's actually going on. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to teach everybody magic effect so that we get into sort of the process here. How this will work is I will perform it for you first, and then I'll teach it, and then we'll kind of walk through and explain it together. My deck of cards is actually in the back. Can I borrow yours? I'm like, can I borrow this? Do you mind? Next to you, come on up. Can you help me? Dana, would you be our volunteer in the audience? Thank you. Normally I don't use the handheld, but I think you all can hear me well enough for the time being. So, all right. So you've had this deck of cards for the last little bit. Go ahead and grab a card for us, please. All right, take a look. Show it to everybody. Okay. No, it's all good. It's not that kind of thing. Brilliant. All right, take a look. Slide it back into the deck. Awesome. Okay. So y'all can see per card going into basically about halfway down. Yep. Okay. Excellent. You remember your card, yes? Okay, great. Well, I was gonna say you all saw her card, but you all heard her card too. Because if we take a look, one card and one card only will actually find itself in the deck, your 6 of spades. So this is, thank you, Linda. Thank you so much, Dana. I'll give these back to you in a minute, because I'm going to use them to demo. So that's the trick that we'll learn. I will not lie to you, this is not the world's greatest card trick, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's not the world's greatest card trick. It's not the world's greatest card trick because that would take me too long. Like, we'd be here for the next 2 months, me teaching you. And number two, this actually is has rolled into it a lot of things that I think are actually, interesting for us to talk about from a design perspective. So, this fact has a moment of setup, which I did in front of you, which is not ideal, but it's this. I'm actually going to unset it up so you can see it. So I took the deck of cards. Took the card that was on the bottom, turned it face up, and put it back on the bottom of the deck. So now all of the cards are facing the same orientation except the last card. So this is my setup now, and I'm ready to go. So then what happens is I invited Dana up, I fanned out the cards, not so far as to show that, but just enough for her to take one. She does. While you all were looking at that, I took the entire deck and turned it over. So now that card that was the reverse card on the bottom is now the top, and now the entire deck is reversed. So that's what's happening while you are all doing a few things, which is A, visually looking at this, and B, trying to encode this into your short-term memory, which honestly is actually very difficult.
As somebody who has seen thousands of magic performances, has more cards than you want to know about. It is still, when I watch magic performances, I still in my own head have to be like, two cards, okay, two cards. Like it's, I don't know, maybe I just have bad memory, I don't know. But it's something we have to actively think about. So you're visually looking at something, you're having to remember something, you're listening to somebody talk, you're having to do a lot of things. So this, you're not paying attention to. So now the bottom is now the top. This is all reversed. So then when she goes and inserts that card back into the deck, this looks very convincing. This looks correct. But in fact, she was putting her card into the deck backwards herself. And so I can show, okay, it looks like this is really going in about halfway into the deck. Then essentially all I have to do is correct the orientation of the deck so that it's in its original position. And that's it. So what I did, and we'll do a little bit more of a quick deep dive into this in a minute, but instead of, I could have done this, which would have been ridiculous, but to just correct the orientation of the card. Instead, what I did, so I have, she just inserted her card. It's now the only card reversed on the back. I have the bottom, top. Is I posed a question to her. I said, you remember your card, right? She said yes. And then I turned and I asked you guys, and I said, oh, you all saw the card. Well, actually, I know you heard the card, etc. So now the card is actually reversed as I turned my entire body with my hand. So now the deck is reversed. And now I can show, now I can just fan through it and show that one reverse card. So this is the effect. There is so much packed into what is even like on its face, in my opinion, a bad card trick. Which can become a better card, which I'll talk about in a minute. So here's the other thing is I just taught you the basic mechanics for this card set, which again is like whatever. It can be, hey, how are you? It can be something a lot more compelling because this is where we get into the more kind of messaging of what's going on here. Because this effect could be a lot of other things. I presented this as just like, oh, now the card found itself. Okay, what even is that? There's a great, I don't think I have this in my next slide. Oh, I did. These are a little out of order. There's a German magician who does a lot of kind of theory on this sort of thing. He talks about the relationship of the magician to the magic you're presenting. And we're going to talk about this later as it pertains to the design process and users. And I'm so happy that we have a lot of user experience folks here. But we think about certainly within like contemporary Western society, and this, he gave this talk like 15 years ago. Some of this language is a little outdated, so bear with me. But he talks about the idea of a magician functioning in 3 roles in relation to the magic one is presenting, which is in relation to a crime scene. So for example, most magic that we see, if you watch magic on TV or on YouTube or whatever, is like magician as killer, which is like, I did this thing, I, kind of perpetrated this situation or whatever. and that you are in control of what's going on. The other thing that we see sometimes is if you've seen more like comedy magic, sometimes we see things that are more like magician as victim, which is like the magic. And again, this language is outdated and not great, but bear with me. The idea of like magician as victim, where like the magic is happening to you or at you. So if you think of like, in like the Disney movie Fantasia, when like the broom sequence goes out of control and like all these rooms are appearing and it's like, I can't make this stop. That's like the magic is happening to you and you're not in control of what's going on. And then there's the type of magic we basically never see, which is sort of witness, which is like, here's the thing, I'm standing alongside this and I'm just observing it with you, or I'm just kind of reporting on what I'm seeing. So when we think about sort of relation to sort of this impossible effect, there's different roles that one could take, which I think is something we'll circle back to in the design process, and also thinks about and has deep influence on what the effect, the perceived effect even is. So for example, with this, you know, I kind of presented this in like a really bad, you know, kind of, you know, witness type way, just being like, oh, here's the thing. I could have done, this you'll see is mechanically the exact same thing, but done the better, like a more police story component, and B, with a more insightful and like positioning more like the. So I could have had Dana pick a card. While she's doing that, talked about how I spent the entire pandemic learning to really bolster my sense of touch. And I'm learning to sort of perceive things more acutely with my fingertips. And what I'm going to try to do is actually see if I can locate her chosen card using just my sense of touch. This is already probably more compelling. So again, while you all were looking at the card, I could take and reverse that deck. She puts that back in. So then I can say, all right, to make sure I'm not relying on my vision, I'm going to take the entire deck and try to find it using just my fingertips behind my back. And okay, I think that's it. See if I got it. And then scan through. I got it. So that's the same effect, but it positions me in a different role. It positions what's going on in a different role. And this gets into a design thing we'll talk about later. The way that I did this added a moment of technique to it that I really love, which is a friend of mine in Chicago is the one who leader is the one who came up with the behind the back thing. But as we were talking about it, I was like, wait a minute, you could, I'll just show it to you. What I did is, so I had the deck set up, grab a card. They're looking at it. Turn the deck over. This goes inside. I took this whole deck. It's going, so it's the same orientation. It's so now I've got the one card reversed. I'm not sure if I think hopefully you can see it. What I did is I undid the setup as I was doing it. So I said, oh, so now I've got that last reverse card. I said, oh, I think I found your card. and I like take it out, show it to you, this is the indifferent card that's on the bottom. I never showed it to anybody, but I said, oh, I think this is it. And then I just put that back. So now, now I can just come and reverse the deck and oops, I'm turning and showing you in a way that I'm doing my own thing, but basically, I was taking and, pulling that card out, showing it to you, and now putting it back in the correct orientation. So that now, when I come, I show that card reversed, now I've undid the setup, and I could, like, let's say, for example, I was at a friend's house, or, the bar, or whatever, I could have you borrow the deck of cards, and then say, oh, your card found itself. And now the setup is something. So this sort of stuff is a thing in magic that I love, of where you can have processes that are built in that almost like, for lack of a better term, like cannibalize themselves. Where it's like that we built into the system is already the cleanup as we kind of do that. So again, this is the sort of stuff that as magicians, we're having to take some sort of shortcut. We're having to take some sort of weird material process, whatever, to make some impossible thing happen. So then how do you account for that? How do you, create something that cleans that up? So for example, again, just thinking about how do we frame even with the same object? How do we frame what can be the same effect? Technically, but that could be presented as a superior ability, like I kind of did now. It could be just a simple, impossible identification of, oh, hey, here was your card. Okay, card located itself. Okay. It could have been something like an impossible movement of saying, your card now, and again, this is ridiculous, but your card, now is imbued with the ability to actually, pass through other objects, and it will rotate itself within the deck. And now it has this power of, whatever, bending space and time. So it could have been, kind of posited as that. It also, as another more interesting, but more kind of witness-based premise. What I could have done is said, okay, we go through the same, set. She picks out a card, etc. Puts, takes the card, puts it in the deck, etc. It looks like she's just taking the card out, putting it in the deck. If I got to, let's say, this point, looking at the card, taking it here, I got here. Basically, goes back in the deck. I could have taken the whole thing, set it back on the table, so now that's already like correct show. I could have had a second deck of cards and said, is it Rebecca? Okay. I could have said, Rebecca, you have a deck of cards. And let's do this. You don't actually have to do this, but I'm just giving it some hypothetical. I could have said, now wait, you have a second deck of cards. Your card, what was it? It was a 3 of clubs? Okay. Why don't you take your cards? Take out. Actually, before we even do this, take these cards, put them in your backpack. Put them back in the box, put them in your backpack, we're not going to. Why don't you go through your back? What was the card that you called? Okay, 3 of clubs. Go through your back. Take out the 3 of clubs. I want you to make that markedly different. So take it over, actually reverse it in the deck.
turn it over, put it back in the deck. So now you're the only, the card that you pick is the only card that's reversed. Now, go ahead, open up the deck that's been in your backpack. And now here's the 3 cards that's reversed. That's the same trick. But now it makes it seem like Rebecca's deck that she turned over one card, had a sympathetic reaction and made the card that was your backpack. That card's turned over on it. So again, like that's a much better effect. Same thing, like same mechanics that's happening. So this is the sort of thing, again,
where you think about, you know, what is the effect? What is the perceived like usage of something? Essentially, how is that framed? And then how do we kind of think about this? So within magic, we think about a lot of these underlying assumptions. These assumptions are things that basically, and it's a lot of things that are presented in design as well. We think about these visual and psychological assumptions people have, and then it's our role as magicians to try and speculate through almost like every assumption that people could have, and then account for them in different ways. So one of the assumptions that's built in about all magic generally. I'll go through this. There's a colleague of mine, her name is Anne-Marie Bannon. She's a psychology researcher in Berlin. And she studies magic as a research mechanism to look at moments of insight and problem solving. And so she talks about sort of when people have, like, for example, like, you know, you probably had maybe slightly different moments, sort of a aha moment of when I was explaining this and seeing, oh, the card is reversed on the bottom and now we're getting turned over, and like, oh, now I understand the movement of like how this is making this impossible. You have that aha moment. So Anne-Marie studied that aha moment. And one of the first studies that she did on this was about false insights and sort of trying to deconstruct that idea and using magic. So, and she's the first person to say it was not the most well-designed study. But as a magician, there was a lot of interesting things that came out of it. She had a lot of stimuli for people, like 30 different magic tricks that participants watched, and that were all very base level, like very simple magic effects. And then participants were asked to both like comment in when they thought that a magic method, like the moment they thought a magic method might have occurred, and then later to have, and this is where she's like, and this wasn't the best design, but to write in what they thought might have happened. So again, not as helpful from a psychology standpoint, but from a magician standpoint, that's nothing. Suddenly I got a window from a more directed standpoint into like what non-magicians think is going on. And inevitably, what people across all categories of magic, people watching coin tricks, rope tricks, you know, things where objects are appearing, disappearing, all these different sort of categories, objects, everything. The same things kept reappearing in terms of what people thought was going on, and the assumptions they were making, which were, they thought something about the process was confusing. They were like, something seemed sort of obfuscated in some way, or I felt like I couldn't quite follow something. So there was always, you know, that was one that was one of the most prevalent ones, was there was something about the process that seemed a little off. Inevitably, people would just write in the word sleeves, which was hilarious to me, because this is a rare example. I almost never wear garments with sleeves, like ever. I always have sleeves rolled up. For the performance tonight, I will not have sleeves down like this. There's a book from the 1880s It's one of the, it was like a major magic book at the time, where he was really one of the most well-respected magic writers. And he at the time was like, can't believe these non-magicians think that we put things up our sleeves. This is hilarious. Like, so like even like 130, 40 years ago, even then people are like, wow, can't believe people think this. So this is still like a weird trope that exists. Similarly with a table, people always were just like, I don't know, there's something about that table. So again, people's minds are looking for some place to go to assume something about an object or a process. And then same thing, and people would make a lot of assumptions about the material. And that's what ended up being, I ended up using a lot of this information to design a piece of magic that I did. Where, for example, one of the effects that they watched was cut and restored rope effect. It was just a magician taking a pair of scissors, cutting rope in half, you know, tying it back together and restored. So many people said, oh, you know, within the thickness of the rope, there's magnets in it. Or there's some sort of adhesive. So people were making all these, before they even sort of cognitively put that to paper, they're making these assumptions about like, oh, the rope is, you know, kind of cylindrical, there could be something inside of it, there could be, you know, whatever, and there's something that's adhering to itself. They're making all these assumptions about the way that different materials can function together to make something possible. And so then I was working on a similar effect, and I literally just went down and I'm like, I'm gonna make it so every single one of these mental assumptions could not be true. Right off the bat. Like, for example, I was working on also, it was a cut and restored piece of magic with a large piece of cloth. So suddenly you have something that's totally flat as opposed to being more three-dimensional. And then with that too, I used the thinnest, most almost semi-sheer fabric that I could find that would still be opaque enough to where you could not have problems of it being too transparent. So that way people were like, this is like less than paper thin, and depending on the lighting in the room is nearly backlit. And so I can see that there's not magnets in this. I can see that there's not, you know, it's not some sort of like self-mending material, you know, I know now we're talking about these like really cool, you know, kind of bad materials or whatever, but, and then the other part of it was to kind of negate, there was a whole other laundry list of stuff, but to negate this sort of stuff would have, instead of me being the one to cut and destroy the fabric, I had somebody in the audience do it, so they knew it wasn't me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I had process-based things that were removed, so it was somebody else doing this other than me. I had a small table that I used as part of it that I had made out of acrylic, clear acrylic, so it was totally clear, it was thin and totally clear. And then I had, again, this sort of material aspect of it that I then had, at the very end of it, the person from the audience also gets to keep the fabric. So it's fully inspectable. So it's like everybody can see, people could pass it around, they could see, okay, there's nothing embedded in this, there's nothing, you know. And there was 1,000 other things, but that's just an example. So in terms of what we're looking at today, this relies on some very basic, you know, assumptions here visually, right? I want to make sure I'm hitting my own points sort of thing on time. This is so much about object familiarity. We think about a deck of cards in numerous different ways, and we have so many different assumptions about all, you know, objects around us. So I'll use the cards are helpful to kind of talk about this idea. But we see this object in a weird way as both one thing and many things. We see this, for example, if I'm just holding a deck of cards, most people perceive this as one object. You're not like looking at this as 52 individual objects that I'm holding per se. However, that helps a lot in the methodology, because if you're perceiving this more than one object, you're not necessarily thinking of disparate parts as being different or changed or contributing to an internal mechanism here. What it also helps with is we have a working familiarity of like any kid who's ever played, Go Fish or whatever, you're used to dealing with playing cards. And if you drop cards on the floor and you pick them up and you've got like 2 or 3 that are facing the wrong direction, this is wrong. This is considered incorrect. So one would try to correct this. So you would not think of this as a process or a design that is not only helpful, but that a single card or 2 single cards or something being reversed is not only not incorrect, but we think that is making it possible. So there's, again, so many thoughts about sort of the, that. I'm going to quickly take a look at, I want to see where I am in my own, I might get to, we're at the very end of this magic section before I get into some of the design type of stuff. So what we might do is I might finish this for the last 2 minutes. And then since I know that like food and hot coffee just got here, my biggest pet peeve in life is food that is hot, that is no longer hot. And especially coffee that is supposed to be hot, and it's no longer hot. So we may finish this and then break for coffee, because if anybody else in this room is like, it's called it out. Oh my God. So, okay. The last thing I'll talk about with this is the sequence of movements that's happening here. And again, sort of assumptions on the sequence of movements. So for example, with this deck of cards, I talked about already how, I had this set up. I need to turn this deck over twice, basically, orient and then finish that 360. There, as you have watched me, since some of you came in at, 8:50 and whatever, you have watched me stand here and do this a lot. And I know that I do this a lot, and I know that I do this a lot, and I know what shoes I wear every performance, and I know exactly how I stand and move in these shoes, and I know all of this. And so because I know my own natural tendencies of how I stand and move when I talk to people, I can build that in to a method. This works with movements we all do all the time. Magicians capitalize on this like bad. So I know that if I need to do this, yeah, that's like psychotic. Instead, I know that by the time I've already been up here for probably 20 seconds, by 8:52, you all were not even, me doing all this didn't even look at normal to you anymore. Because you've seen me do this stuff a million times. And you just go, okay, that's how that person stands and walks and like whatever. And you're not even paying attention to it anymore. So now I know that because you're just, again, shortcut. You're not paying attention anymore. So I can use that when I'm needing to turn the deck over and I do this movement and you don't even see it. And now the whole deck is turned over. And we're done. So there's so many movements that we're all doing all the time that how do we use these very built-in, very natural movements to help? So we'll talk more about that. We're gonna take 2 minutes to get a couple of.
And then we'll talk more about the design aspect of this. But yeah, let's break for 5 minutes, or let's say 10:35, restroom, coffee, etc. Okay. I think everyone is caffeinated and snacked. Okay. So, you know, in a sense, I feel like there's like rather obvious conclusions here, but basically we'll kind of talk about a few more things in terms of the and I'm going to minimize this guy in terms of the process here, and you know, some sort of takeaways essentially on, you know, what magic utilizes you know, to kind of more from like a solution oriented type of thing. So you know, again, that's, you know, kind of the point of why we're here. And just to kind of recap in the morning, you know, we're looking at, you know, assumptions and expectations, blind spots and focus, both literally and metaphorically. I think there's so much that happens when we're looking at objects and processes in terms of where those kind of perceptual gaps lie in terms of usage and what's really happening, how something really needs to function. And then I think also in terms of, you know, this sort of effect that is both being desired and achieved. Because essentially there's that a weird kind of two-way street within magic, like we saw, is like, you know, the deck of cards, how that's being utilized, that was the same mechanism. But then the effect that is being perceived by an audience is very different than mechanically what's happening. So I think that's something that can really be thought about in a lot of design. I think there's also a lot too that happens, certainly the weird sort of duality within magic that I think is that's unique, but also not, is that within magic, there's literally two completely different things happening in tandem. Where like what I am doing and also what I am seeing and perceiving is completely different than what an audience is seeing and perceiving me do. So from, again, just from like a design perspective, I know, and I can be thinking to myself within, you know, the card trick, for example, like, okay, you know, my setup is done, yada, yada, yada. Okay, now I know whatever. And I'm doing all of those things and I'm being aware of all of these different things, as opposed to on the surface, to everybody watching who's never seen that card trick before, it looks like nothing happened. When in fact, you know, by the time that she just like took the card out and put it back in the deck, there was already like 3 or 4 different, you know, kind of magic secret processes that happened. But to people watching it, was like, she picked a card, she put it back in the deck. So it's a very interesting thing of like, what are those kind of top line processes, and then what are all the underlying things that are making that possible, that are not sort of readily perceptible. That's the sort of stuff I find really interesting within magic. And then of course, obviously sort of the unexpected tools and processes that magic employs. Again, this is sort of rehashing the beginning of what I talked about, but hopefully now, kind of appears to you in a slightly different lens. Of the like, okay, what's improbable versus unexpected versus impossible, etc. So much of magic is about these assumptions on objects, processes, behaviors, and then how we take that into account and redesign for it. This is something that I think hopefully will, when Stephen demonstrates the central line kits, like at least certainly within my own mind as a magician, I hope that this is the big part, or one of the big parts that you bring to it, is looking at all the assumptions, because there's so many assumptions that are being brought to bear with so many aspects of the medical field generally, patients, providers, the materials that are being used in this thing, and the sequence. Because a lot of my brain goes like sequential ordering and processes. So that's a big part of what I see here. So again, this is so much of what magic, kind of brings to the table, I think. So, again, you all can read. I don't really need to walk through all of this. This sort of thing, again, is this sort of like, that top line and then hidden process sort of thing. This is where I think, from a more mechanical standpoint, I think things can get a lot more interesting, in terms of like, what are those underlying mechanisms and processes that then can, create something more interesting. Like, for example, within magic, there's a lot that I'm doing in more complex things. Like, you'll see me perform a couple of pieces tonight, that I have to have, and I mean this in the most like loving way possible, I have to have an extreme amount of control on the behavior of the person who I'm working with. And they can't know that. And so when you go, like, for example, this is not a real example, but this is the sort of conversation magicians have all the time, or like, ad nauseam. It's like, let's say, for example, I feel like this is one of these parallels designers too. If I need somebody to pick up this cup here and not here, how do I make sure that they do that? How do I make sure, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we make sure? Because let's say, for example, let's say that this cup is not really, this is not real. I'm not going to do, let's see, but let's say that this cup was actually not the cup of coffee I've been drinking out of, and I swapped it out for something that's weighted in a certain way, for the weight to feel correct, for it to like tip to the point it feels like it's liquidy or something, that I needed to be picked up to the balance leverage point and it feels right. Then maybe I would have somebody grab it down here as opposed to up here. So then maybe that means the taper on it has to be designed at a certain angle for most people's hands. Maybe that means that I need to say, when I tell somebody to pick it up, it also means that I say, I'm sorry to come up with something on the top of my head, but I say, oh, hey, do you see the what is the writing? The writing at the top of the cup, so they don't neglect it by the bottom, or say, or whatever, some mechanism so that there's something that makes a more intuitive form of interacting with an object that's built into it, from the object design, from the way it's explained, the way maybe it's written about, the way some sort
lot of mirroring and modeling that happens in magic. If you watch me only pick up something like this, you're probably less likely to pick it up like that. Because that's just how we operate. There's a great,
I'm looking at our time. I'm tempted to teach, I think we have time. I'm tempted to quickly teach another card trick for that sort of modeling process of it, which I might do, but, we don't really have time.
there's a lot within that, but like, let's say, for example, I would need, somebody to, within the mechanism of card trick, I need somebody to drop down, kneel down cards on the table, and I need them to be messy, and not in like, not somebody kneeling around in like perfect stack. Then I'll just be like, oh, just toss some cards down on the table, and I'll do a few first, and I'll just like do it. Every time, like, this is again, like a kid's magic trick that I've done 1,000 times. Never once have I seen a person in like a weird circle. People are given model what you said. So there's so much within that of like how it's magic use that like language, mirrored behavior, even a spatial thing of like me taking into account how much space is available on a table to know, if I'm not going to do that piece of magic, if I see I can only have a corner of the table where they would have to have a more confined area, make a pile a little tighter. You can only do that in a bigger area where I can, whatever.
So there's so much with that where you're taking into account this sort of just basic human behavior. So again, this is the sort of things where, we think about what are, not only what you're seeing modeled in a more direct sense, but then this sort of memory of past events and processes. It's like the 1 or 2 cards being, reversed in the deck, that we see that as an error. And not as helpful. So there's so much just within basic memory, and so much of magic is being the setup for something, and how, bless you, and how the setup for something is what facilitates, essentially, our ability to use those tools in ways that are strategic or not. And this is a big part of what I do, is the idea, kind of jumping back to that Ameridanic point, is that there's so much about, magic only happens when there's clarity. Because if, for example, if I had said like, oh, pick out a card. Oh, actually, no, pick out 2 cards and then show one to somebody over here and then show one to somebody over here. And now put both of them back in, and now only one of them, like, you'd be like, what is even happening with this? Like, I can't, like, that's not magical. Like, if you can't follow a very simple, streamlined path of events, everything gets lost. So it's like trying to strip down to like the ultimate clarity. One of my main mentors in magic, who I started working with as a teenager, literally sits on my shoulder and says this to me every day. Not literally. But I was doing very overwrought, overworked, overcomplicated magic because I was 18 and I thought that was cool. And he was just sat me down and he was like, there's the way of the potter and the way of the sculptor. I think I was like, and he's like the potter. I was like, and so literally on a nearly daily basis, I'm like, chip away, chip away, chip away. And I think that's what good magic does. I think that's what good design does. how do we streamline stuff so it's intuitive, so it's functional, obviously now, so it's more sustainable. I think this is the sort of thing that is really helpful when we think about how to create clarity. And that does, help. You'll see this in spades when we look at the kits, but magic relies so much on this sort of choreographed movement, like I was talking about, the sort of the turning of my own body, and also the choreograph of essentially a team, because I'm doing my thing while she was showing you the card. So I know that one person is doing one task that then basically dictates me doing another task at the same time to make both of those things more effective. So there's so much choreography that's happening in magic when you look at the exact sequence of processes that need to happen and for how them to be most effective, not only in that behavioral standpoint, but just in like a time standpoint. So you'll see choreography is huge in terms of when we look at the sequencing of the kits in a little bit. I talked about this briefly, but this idea of sort of setups and then, things that sort of clean up themselves, these processes, because again, like within magic, that creates magic that's more impressive. If things can be inspected by people, if they can be, it's all very nonchalant. But this is also the sort of thing when you're creating things to be most efficient, that is very helpful. So I'll show you, I'm a little like, part of me is a little hesitant. I thought very hard on this, whether or not I would show this to you guys. I have a very, I guess, long-standing thought on like ethics and secrecy in magic. In that, I've always been very hardline, like no exposure of any magic secrets ever. Aside from things that are very simple, like the card trick I taught, I will not lie to you, that's in like a lot of library magic books in some way, shape, or form. So there's things like that where it's sort of readily available. We're gonna distribute the magic kits in a bit, like that sort of stuff is also readily available. But then there's things that people get into that are like a little bit more complicated, things like that. Part of me went, do I share this one thing with you or not? The utilitarian part of me goes yes, because if there's anything that can come out of today that helps, genuinely like helps people have better health, then like why would I not share that? And this is a big part of what inspired this conversation, was that I spent the better part of last year designing a magic prop that I think will be helpful in this conversation today. It was something I used professionally, granted in an extremely bizarre context. So all I ask is like, outside of this context, please don't share this. Like I am kind of famous for like having people sign NDAs and stuff. You all are very smart. I trust you. I'm not that concerned that you all are gonna like start a vlog or go on YouTube about this, but also I'm not so self-righteous that I think you're gonna take your precious time and make a YouTube video about my thing. So basically what I'll do is I'll set this clip up. I'm going to show you the video of me performing this, and then I'll talk through it because I think you'll see a lot of parallels between this and the Central Mind kits. So my big project last year was I had started, well, jumping back a little bit in time. My whole life I've been fascinated by the relationship between surprise and magic. I think surprise also is a fascinating part of design. And have been really interested in why certain magic effects are more surprising than others. And essentially got very interested in like a hierarchy of surprise. And when I became an affiliate with MetaLab at Harvard, we started trying, I was suddenly thrust into this digital humanities space, started learning a lot about kind of the history of computational intelligence, which I never expected to be learning about. And then when, okay, you know, kind of started having these conversations with people, one of whom was one of the principals of the lab who said, oh, well, you read the 1950 Turing paper on computational intelligence. And I was like, oh, man. And he was like, you should read this. I think you'll like it. And because it's a lot about surprise. He didn't even know that I personally was doing a lot of research on surprise. Anyway, started this project for me about whether surprise is a defining factor of human consciousness or not. And then it was about this next year-long project of taking, working with a programmer to create machine-generated descriptions of magic effects that were text only. And then basically I had to invent ways to perform them. And then essentially the performance was basically people being like thrust into a real life Turing test. There were a bunch of different objects in different boxes. People would roll dice, and then whatever number they rolled, I would take the object out of that box. I would perform a piece of magic with it. Some of the things were pieces of magic from like typically like the late 19th century, and some of which were machine generated. And so people would not be sure what I was performing, which was like, we wouldn't tell them which was which. And so people were kind of left with like, is this a historic thing? Was this generated with the help of machine learning? Like, we're not really sure. So I will tell you guys, the piece that I'll show you the video clip from was generated with the help of machine learning. So I had to figure out a way to invent what essentially was a magic trick of transforming, transforming ice cubes to rice. That's what I was tasked with. And candidly, I had because of some grant timing changing and stuff, I had a very abbreviated time to work on this. So I only had like 4 months maybe to work on this. So I'll play the video. It's like 2 minutes and you'll get to see it. Hopefully we have sound. We do. I might, I am tempted to, oh, there's no way for me to, it's because of the screen sharing.
I might need to change the sound preferences.
Yeah, I'm not gonna worry about it. You'll get the gist of it. So, for reference, this is very different from what I normally do. And again, it's like intentionally really weird and also is not the best magic I've ever done. But, you know, so basically when you look at like what is, you know, the design challenge here, essentially is, okay, I've got a, you know, I've got ice that was real, and also like the fact that I said that should make you think differently about some things, but I've got ice that's actively melting. And then that has to then turn into a bowl of like loose, uncooked rice. That has to basically occupy the same space. So it's like, I've got to be able to show a cardboard box. And this video didn't capture it, but it was basically happening in like contemporary art gallery that was like in an old warehouse, basically in New York. And so we had a pile of just broken down cardboard boxes that was like just off to the side. So I like just walked over, grabbed one of the pile of broken down cardboard boxes and popped it open. That was like the start. So I was like, I need to be able to take a flattened cardboard box. People can see it's like just a broken down cardboard box. Open it up, show it empty, assemble it, take melting ice, put it inside of a paper product, close it, and then instantly open it and now have loose rice come out, you know. So that was and then be able to take the box, show it empty again, and fold it flat and throw it off to the side, like toss it. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars and hundreds of hours later, and now I know every cardboard box manufacturer that makes certain types of cardboard boxes. This was an old prototype, but like this is the prototype of the cardboard box. I'll show this to you. I'll show you the sequence of how this worked. Again, please don't show this is kind of paining my soul. But so this is the sequence of the box. So this was what people saw. This was grabbed off of a pile of cardboard boxes. What people did not see was, you saw this. What people did not see is that from the back, there's an entire, that bowl that you saw was in this spandex pouch that is off the back. So essentially, and then there is a secret compartment. So the setup for this was that I had, this was one of my earlier prototypes. I had that bowl, which was not a porcelain bowl. It was plastic. It was plastic that had a certain amount of rice in it. And then there was a lid that didn't screw on. It was only put on from one side, basically, that was actually porcelain. And then it was the bottom plastic part was made to be painted to match the top. What that did is it cut down on the weight drastically. And it was a plastic that was made from I can't remember. It was like a ultralight recycled plastic. So basically I had the bowl full of rice, the plastic with like the lid that can only open from one side. It was like hinged basically, and then have like a kind of a pop off. So it would like only open from one side and then to be popped off. That was loaded into here, so that basically like the hinged part was at the bottom. And then that basically like pushed all the way out. And then this secret compartment got placed on top of it. And then, so then that would depress that being held all the way. And then this got, this was actually, a specific adhesive that's used in plumbing. Because then it's waterproof too. And it's super strong. So then that basically held down that compartment. So what you had, and I honestly don't have that bowl with me, obviously, but I had this massive bowl hanging off the back of this spandex. And so that was kind of that. And then I also had inside this separate, this was one of the earlier bags, because I played with a lot of different plastics that wouldn't make noise, or less noise, was then I had, this plastic compartment, that then the ice could go into. I also had inside of it, I just grabbed some of my extra, it's basically a ShamWow. So then I had like a ShamWow that lined the inside of the bag, so that not only when it hit, because I had to dampen the sound of the ice hitting the side of the plastic bowl, because they were, basically touching. So I had to dampen the sound, and then also have something absorbent in there. So this was functioning in both of those roles. So this was adhered to the inside of that plastic, and then had different types. I had, I think it was like 3 different types of adhesive happening, of tapes that could be pulled off really quietly, and then so that this bag could be moved. So that is basically the sequel. That's basically like the setup of this. So what I had then to start with for this rice to ice situation, or ice to rice, was this bag being empty, the ShamWow adhered inside that was like at a certain angle, and then this whole bowl full of rice with like the hinged part down, and then being pressed, and this was like pressed so hard in here. It was like crazy. And then this all was both not stapled, but it was like basically like stapled into the bag, and then also epoxy in on all the edges so that it could withstand the force of not coming apart. And then there was this adhesive here holding those 2 compartments together. So basically my setup is having the bag, having a big bowl hanging off the back, and then I had a pile of broken down cardboard boxes so that I can just grab this. Again, it was all weighted in a certain way so that I can just grab this, and it just looks like, I'm just grabbing a cardboard box, whatever. This is garbage. It's literally garbage. This is definitely not something I spent like $500 on. And then can pop it open, and then, would be able to show it empty. And then this was also designed in a way that my, since I have sleeves rolled up, this is not that terribly different from the color of my skin. So that helped, and then was able to hold it in a way that my arms were camouflaging the whole bowl that was like hanging down off the back. So I can do this, I could show it like all the way around, and it looks totally empty. And so then the height of the bowl was like the exact same size as this. So it was all like to be the maximum size and weight of something I could hide off the back of this box and not have everything fall apart. So that was this, and then was able to close this up. And then once this essentially tipped forward, it started to naturally tip forward on its own. But then this was another thing that then as I was assembling the box, I would just
kind of hug it to myself, that would push the whole bowl into the box, which then would further open that entire compartment. So now I have the whole bowl is like loaded into the box. It's now loaded so that like the hinged lid is now like, you know, down, so the rice is not spilling out. So it's all like basically sitting in the bottom of the thing, oriented correctly. And now this was open, the bag was open, it was held to one side. So I could still reach down and grab the bowl and pull it out properly. And then I had this bag open to one side. So now I could take the ice, pour that, you know, just take handfuls of ice and putting it into the compartment with the, you know, absorbent material in the bottom, and then close this up. So I'm closing that up with the whole compartment, etc. And then open it up, pull out just the bowl. And then basically it's was just taking now the bag full of ice. And then when I closed the whole thing up, that then was getting the pouch full of ice coming off the back, but that's still, it's contained, it's being absorbed, so it's not leaking. And then could take it and then just throw it. And then I could just throw it off to the side on top of the other pile of boxes. And because the sound was dampened and everything was kind of being contained, it wouldn't make a sound. And this was all done in basically total silence. Because I usually perform like in like total silence or very minimal like ambient noise. So that is like sort of also the thing of like when we started to look at these kits, or at least when I am seeing them through you know, my magician brain that just spent months on this, I'm going, here's a way that you have a liquid needing to move and be absorbed, you have that needing to be kept separate from something that's pieces, you're having this, you know, unfolding of things, etc., etc. So that's where my brain had been for the last several months. With that being said, I'm actually going to bring up Stephen now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will bring you back up. And then you guys get to now that A, you're all amateur magicians, and B, have learned some bits about magic. Steven's gonna demo how to use one of these kits for you.
So I think we can actually probably just come over to this table. There should be enough where and driver. So you know, basically for the last 14 years I've been working as a practitioner in emergency medicine. Then when COVID hit, I was working in ICU, and so most of my role was intubating people and putting them on a ventilator, and then putting central line in. And like I spend my whole day like intubating, putting central line in. And so I hadn't thought a lot about the equipment and the way this is set up too much initially, but then when you're doing this like a couple times a day, and you're like, who designed this? And why is it set up this way? And it's not always like perfectly accessible. And the kits aren't necessarily designed to make it easy for me to do this procedure. And a lot of my time was, you know, just setting it up so that I had everything I needed. And you know, that's where Jeanette and I started to think, hey, maybe there's some application here to take magic principles, engineering, design, and like make this better. And so I did contact Teleflex to make some kits. They gave us some kits. I didn't tell them that I made their kits. We did that. We did say, hey, you know, we really had to change the design, and it's a way that you get like farming. So that's so.
Taking you down to Stephen.
First thing is this, which is basically the cleansing. So we open the kit, you've got this nice little bonnet that you have to put on, and you have this mask, and you have this cleaning thing. So you've got that stuff. Then you open it up a little further. And this is a sterile gown because everything is done in a sterile fashion. And you got to get that on. We're going to skip that part, but that's an important component because it gets us ready. Then this is what the main components of the kit are. So that's still, once I'm sterilely, I'm sterile. I've cleaned the skin of the patient, and they did put a video in.
Yep.
I don't know if you all watched it. We did have to put a little warning. But if you all watch that, that's basically the procedure. What we're doing is, and I'll kind of walk through what we're doing, is placing a catheter in someone's internal jugular vein. You hope that's where you get it. Sometimes it goes in other spots, or we do it in the femoral vein. But it's all done very under sterile conditions because, that's a central line. That line the end of that line ends up, right next to the heart. And so if those lines get infected, those patients get very, very sick. They can get what's called endocarditis, which is infection of heart valves. They can also get bacteremia, which is a bloodstream infection. So it has to be done, really under sterile conditions. So the next thing is this drape that you put on, and it has a little thing that says head. So you have to then peel this thing off, and this goes right over where I need to be. And then it's got little arrows. And so this drape actually drapes their entire body. And you follow these little arrows. And then this goes all the way down to their feet. This never ends up where you need it to be. Because you're doing it kind of blindly. And so then you have to reposition that to get it to where you need to be. So it's a little bit, of an issue because you stick this on and then you've got to move it around. And oftentimes then we have to get another, cleansing device because we had to move the position of that. So we move that, get it in the right spot. All of this is generally done with ultrasound guidance. I learned to do it without ultrasound guidance because I've been doing it for a long time. But now the way we do it is using an ultrasound. And so we'll identify that blood vessel. And then here's the components of the kit and how it's set up. And so really kind of everything needs to come out of this kit and placed on that sterile surface in order for this to work. So you start out, you have lidocaine to just anesthetize the skin. So you got to open that up. Right. And you've got gloves on, you've got that mask on, and these things are never easy to open. Sometimes I actually take the scalpel and do it, which can be a little dangerous. But you pop this off and you've got a needle to draw up the medication. I'm just going to throw these on the lawn later. I'm just kidding. So you drop the medication, and then I'm going to anesthetize the area that I'm going to be using. And then this has a safety, and I'll leave that open. And we've got a ton of kits for you guys to play with, but this slides up to protect the needle. But we sometimes leave it like this because the patient may need more anesthesia. And so if this didn't work, I need to keep this open and get another vial. So that can be a pain sometimes as well. So now you've got an open needle, somewhere on your field. Then the other devices that we need are a scalpel. And again, you can just see what the design of that is. This is an introducing wire. All right. And then, so I'll start placing things in the order that I'm going to need them, but they're getting placed out, and sitting there. And so they're kind of exposed to the environment. You need suture material, you need your line. And so I start just placing these things, and then you need what's called introducer needle. You need a dilator. So all this stuff has to get taken out of the kit in order for me to do the procedure. What I kind of was like, I'd love it if I could just have layers that I can just take a layer and that layer comes off. Not that I'm giving you ideas, but and then also there's a bunch of stuff that's in this kit that then you just don't even use. Like there's this needle. I don't even know what this thing is. I have no idea what this is for. I've never used it. I don't know what it's for. Sometimes I'll take them out of the kit and just play with them because they're fun. And this is supposed to be for all your needles. This is supposed to be for this needle, for any other needle I use. And it's just too small and it doesn't.
And that's just to clean it? or
Yeah,
is
no,
it
this is when I'm
to-
done with the needle.
Oh, when you're done with the needle.
When you're done with the needle, you stick it in there.
I see. Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it's tiny. So what I would then do is I have, my patients here, the head is here, the neck is here, and we have an ultrasound. Anyone want to volunteer? Okay. And so then I advance my needle and I'm watching the ultrasound, and as I'm advancing, I'm pulling back on the syringe until I get blood.
Mhm.
Once I get blood, I stop and I take this off, then blood's starting to leak out here. If it's squirting at me, then I know I'm in the carotid artery, and that's not good. Yeah, you hope no one's looking, you kind of cover the thing up and pull it out. But usually we're in the right place. And then you have to introduce this guide wire, and the guide wire just goes down. And what we kind of look for when there's kind of the heartbeat starts to become a little funky, we know we're a little deep, and then we just pull it back into the right position. So then you're never supposed to let go of this guide wire. So you always are supposed to be holding on. What you do is you take this, you place a nick in the skin. So you poke them in the skin, and then you pull this needle out. And then this is kind of the hard part, is you have to then get these two little pieces together. Never letting go of the wire. And then this goes through the skin and dilates the skin. You pull that out. And then you're going to introduce your, these caps would be off. But then you, again, have to really look really closely. And this is where I realized I need to make an ophthalmologic appointment, because I couldn't see the little wire anymore, or I was just exhausted. But the wire will come out and you advance this into the patient. And then we flush these ports, suture it up, and get an x-ray to make sure it's in the right place. So the things that the reason that we said, well, let's talk about the design of this, is because you saw you have to pull literally everything out. It all gets laid out on the patient or a nearby table. And that creates some problems, because one, if you lay it out on the patient, which is the easiest place for me to grab equipment, if that patient moves and dumps the stuff onto the floor, you get another kid, because you've just contaminated everything. Or you have it on the table, it's just harder to get to, and also people bump into that table, or I've had people put something non-sterile onto it because if it's an emergency situation, sometimes that happens, and you've got to get a whole new kit. And so it's just well, you got to pull everything out and then, put it somewhere and reach for this, reach for that. Certain things make no sense. So this you can close off, but you've got to put this big needle here, which oftentimes tips over. You've got a, scalpel, which does have a retractable scalpel, but that sometimes also becomes an issue, because we do need it to be open most of the procedure. So that's a sharp that's in the area. And then there's sometimes extraneous things in the kit that you don't even use, like this thing, which maybe the manufacturer can tell us. The other piece that I really hate is this. So we used to just suture these to the skin. But now what they want us to do is put this little plastic thing. This is so the line's in their body, and you're supposed to put this little plastic thing as an extra way to secure it so that it can, move a little bit. But it's really hard to do when your hands are covered in blood and, the patient's moving. So it's also a little pain in the ass to use. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but
And they also say, well, that way you can adjust the line, but it doesn't actually slide very well. And it's very, very difficult to use. And so it's just another kind of non-functional piece. But that's basically what we wanted to do, was like, okay, let's bring some people together who have experience with design, who have experience in engineering, who have experience with materials or in the patient experience, and see if they can come up with some new stuff. And so that's what your kind of challenge is for the day. We have a bunch of kits for you guys to play with. And we also have some magic kits for you guys as well to open up. Jeanette, did you show them any of the effects from those kits? Okay. And that was kind of part of the plan, because you can look at some of the stuff, but we'll be here as consultants that you can come and find us for either what is this part of the kit? How do you do that? What's the things that you didn't like about it, and what are the things you might want to make better? And we also can consult you on some of the magic effects in there, because I'll bring one up, or actually, Jeanette, are you able to grab one? I can grab it. Yeah, because it's the most incredible magic show ever, as the kit tells you. Yeah, and there are 150 tricks in here, allegedly. But they all are things like that have been around for decades. Like these are the tricks that I learned on. Jeanette, I'm sure you have learned it. We've talked about this. There are some things in here that have been here in these magic kits for like as long as magic has been around. Yeah. Different materials.
And metal, and now
Yeah. Like there's 150 different tricks in there, allegedly. Right. And so you guys have all this stuff to play with and look at and figure out. And like I said, we'll be here and around to be consultants for both. So the only thing I think we have to do next is to break them into different groups.
Is now I think now